Now, moving on then, onto page 8, the Mirror is reporting some fairly astonishing scenes at a constituency meeting for Home Secretary Suella Braverman, where a lady called Joan Salter, who's 83 and pictured there, stood up and had a word with her. We've got a clip of it. Here it is.
In 1943, I was forced to flee my birthplace in Belgium and went across war-torn Europe and dangerous seas until I finally was able to come to the UK in 1947. Now, when I hear you using words against refugees like swarms and an invasion, I am reminded of the language used to dehumanize and justify the murder of my family and millions others. Why do you find the need to use that kind of language?
Thank you so much for your question. And let me just say this. I too share a huge amount of concern and sympathy and frustration about the challenge that we are facing. Personally, I too am. My parents were immigrants to this country. My father was kicked out of Kenya. He found refuge and security and opportunity in the United Kingdom at a time when it was, very difficult.
Now, what's not in that particular clip is Braverman went on to say, "I'm not going to apologise for my language. I think we need to talk about it honestly, and despite my background, that is the language that I think we should be using." And it's the language there that Joan had a problem with. So basically, Jason, the Home Secretary has been accused of not the word fascism, but certainly acting like fascists and acting a bit like a Nazi, to be fair. Words like that do get thrown around a bit too lightly, in my view. But I do think if anyone knows when to use it, it's probably a Holocaust survivor. And some weight is lent to the fact that they're acting like fascists by the fact that how the Home Office reacted to this, Jason.
They've tried to get the video taken down. They say it's been selectively edited. I'm not sure. What really worries me about this is her Braverman's kind of inability to grasp how important words are, or perhaps she does understand how important words are and uses them deliberately. But when you have somebody talking about saying, "I dream of a day I can put people on a flight to Rwanda," as though that's a good thing, and is incapable of understanding the trauma of those involved who have risked their lives to try and get to this country, have been people trafficked, and the lives they've left behind, which in a lot of cases is conflict, war, torture, suppression. And then you dehumanize them by talking about using words like swarm and invasion. And her inability to realize that she's making these people sound like they're non-existent. They're some sort of they don't have individual personalities. They're people who are coming here, and the implication is that they are therefore going to leech off us or abuse our hospitality. It is I think, incredibly cowardly, because if you're in a position of power like Braverman is, you have the platform to put forward a positive message. Yes, you can say we want to control our borders. There's nothing wrong with that. And people want that. But with that comes the responsibility to speak with humanity and to not stir up hatred. And Braverman has done none of those things. And then she had the gall, because we didn't run the full clip. She goes on to say, "I'm incredibly proud of this country because of its tolerance and its sense of fair play and its generosity." Well, if she's proud of those things, why doesn't she practice them? Because at the moment, there's no safe routes to come to this country if you're seeking asylum. there's exceptions. There are for Ukrainians, there are for Afghanistan, but and for people from Hong Kong. But if you're fleeing Iraq or Iran, which are countries which we have long histories with, or if you're fleeing Syria, where there's a horrific civil war still taking place, there's no safe way of getting to this country. And that applies to children as well. And people will say, oh, we'll just let everybody in. But actually, at the moment, there's a backlog of 140,000 cases of people seeking asylum. The latest estimates are about 2/3 of those, and this includes people crossing the channel, will be successful. But not all Albanians. They're not all people trying to kind of abuse our hospitality. There are people in genuine need, and until Braverman has the courage to actually stand up and say that, she's just going to kind of pollute this discourse and actually just stir up the hatred, which is why Joan Salter, the 83-year-old woman who left Belgium, has a very important point.
Thanks for that, Jason. I don't think there's anything to add to that, really. I think you pretty much said it all, except, of course, it's the issue that, well, it's the fact that it's treated as an issue rather than a group of people. And they're not an issue; they are a group of people. And if the Home Secretary wants to say that people come here and they don't have the right to be here, or they're not useful to us as a nation, then she is evidence that that's wrong. That people who have been refugees and given a safe route, as they were out, the Ugandan Asians were given a safe route out of Kenya, away from Idi Amin, to come to the UK. That's how her parents benefited, and that's how she has benefited, and that's why we have presumably benefited from her being here, from her paying her taxes here. And all those figures show that refugees produce more in tax than they take out, as opposed to native-born Britons who tend to do it the other way around. Then she is the best advert for why you let refugees in, isn't she? Because she's a wealthy woman, she's done well for herself. They were given a safe route, and if only she could see that you give a safe route to other people and they come to this country, traumatized, but not as badly traumatized as if they've had to flipping well swim here, then it's in everyone's best interest, one would have thought. Now, Mike says, why did the supposedly non-political Home Office put out a tweet asking for this video to be taken down and suggesting that it was taken out of context? There are some sort of edited clips, but the fact is that it's not like they're doing a deep fake and switching her words around and stuff. She said this stuff. She said to a Holocaust survivor who called her up on her language, I'd stand by the language, didn't she? There's not an awful lot of out of context wriggle room for her to have there, is there, Jason?
No. It's quite clear that she has no intention of apologising for that language, and it's quite clear she stands by the government policy as it stands. And I'm kind of, and it's incredibly depressing policy because, as you say, immigration has brought so much to this country. I mean, it's something which we should be incredibly proud of in terms of its diversity, its culture, its music, its entrepreneurship, and we have a ridiculous system where we actually kind of, if you seek asylum in this country, you're not allowed to work. And I was kind of, and how much we're missing out as a result of that. Just how much more people could contribute and make this country even more exciting and prosperous. And I find it incredibly depressing that we kind of, the way we use language about asylum and refugees and immigration, and I find it incredibly depressing that you can talk about fair play and generosity and hospitality and then use those words so loosely that they actually have no meaning.
And don't display any of it yourself. Now, Leslie says the amount of dehumanising that's occurred in the past 13 years is astounding. Isn't it time we started to fully expose it? Well, Joan's done a great job, Leslie. which we're happy to aid and abet her with. I think it's worth bearing in mind that the refugee situation on the planet is going to get worse as climate change increases, because that will lead to more failed states, more fundamentalism, and more migration. So we are going to have to come to terms with this, I'm afraid.